say goodbye to manual recruitment. Research, product, design, engineering, and marketing want to talk to users. With Rally, now they can. Introducing Rally's MCP, your research infrastructure, accessible in the tools you already use.
Here's what your team has already explored. Which study template would you like to use? I found 3 in your workspace.
Here's what's happening under the hood inside Rally. Reops sets the guardrails. Everyone else moves fast inside them. When every team can talk to users, better products get built. Rally MCP, available now. Reops Agent, coming July 2026.
I pride myself on being very independent, which isn't necessarily about doing things on my own. It's about having choice. And when that choice is taken away from me because the app or website is inaccessible, my independence is pretty much gone.
Every day, 1.3 billion people living with disabilities face barriers when trying to access essential digital experiences.
I live on my phone. I use it for shopping. I use it for communication.
I work online. I volunteer online. I do my banking online.
A lot of apps are not designed with accessibility in mind.
Something that should only take me a few minutes ends up taking me an afternoon because it's just not working.
It can get really frustrating when I encounter a barrier. I just see if I can find an alternate website or just completely abandon it.
For me to have better access to digital experiences, it needs to be a fundamental change in the way user experiences are designed.
Let people look at your product before you release it. It's user testing. We just haven't been including people with disabilities.
When it's more accessible and easier, you're more likely to stay on that program or even come back to that website. You're gonna have more satisfied customers, and that's just gonna be better overall for everybody.
If my world is accessible, I am incredibly successful.
Logo, Fable. Make it fable.com.
Yes, their investment in our community allows us to make these wonderful connections and wonderful content free for everyone. So wonderful. Thank you for all your support. Next, I want to kick things off once again to our good friends at Tarek. Please, Jack, give it up for Jack from Tarek.
Hello, hello. How's it going, everyone? Welcome to day 2 of Research Week. How's everyone feeling tonight? Awesome. My name is Jack. I'm the CTO of Tarek. And yeah, many of you probably haven't heard our name before. Tarek is the new panel provider on the block. We specialize in niche B2B audiences. We take the same tech behind AI moderation and bring it to the screening process to bring you the best experts for your research process. So if you're in need of audiences, you can see our booth is right behind you. And yeah, come by. Thank you.
Give it up for Jack. Thank you, Jack. If you guys are hanging out in the Tarek Lounge, I know you're a big fan because those are some of the comfiest looking sofas I have ever seen. And probably the best seats in the house, I'm not gonna lie. Okay, if we can settle down a little bit, grab your seat, cool. We have an extraordinary program for you this afternoon. If you can grab your seats and settle down a little bit, great. I have to give a quick shout out to someone who's not here today. Our original host and curator for this program, her name is Savina. She is an incredible UX researcher at Anthropic and worked so hard to put together this program. Unfortunately, she could not be here with us today, but we are lucky to have one of her wonderful colleagues here who I'll introduce in just a minute. But if you could please, just on the off chance she's able to join this live stream, please give a very big round of applause to the curator of this program who couldn't be with us, Savina Hawkins. We love you, Savina. I've gone through all the content myself, and this is truly going to be one of the most exciting and action-packed programs we have. So now, without further ado, I want to introduce our wonderful host for today, who is Savina's colleague. Her name is Jane Liebrock, and she is the head of research at Anthropic. Truly a very special person, someone I've had a wonderful time getting to know over the last few years. So Jane, how about you take it away, come on up here, and lead us through this afternoon program. Please give it up for Jane, everybody.
Hello, Research Week. Thank you, Alex, so much. I'm really excited to be here. Who wants to talk about AI? Yeah, I love AI. We're going to talk a lot about AI. But because I'm a researcher, I'm going to actually start by talking about people. I just want to share one research result with you all that I think sets the stage for what we're going to talk about today. So I'm going to take you back to November 2023. I was doing my very first study for Anthropic, where I work now. And we were trying to understand activation, what makes people come alive, like use the product a lot, be happy, be satisfied. So I was doing these qualitative interviews. I was asking people to tell me the story of like, how did you go from really not using AI at all to becoming like a really active user? Walk me through what happened. So I have this person on the phone, my first interview, and they're like, oh yeah, I hadn't really used AI. I was hearing about it. I was like, oh, I really should use it. But it wasn't until I sat down one weekend and I built this tool that I'd really been wanting to make at work. Not because anyone had told me to, but I just really wanted it to exist. And during that weekend, I just like got really excited. I realized how fun it was and like everything I could do. And since then, I've just been using it every day. I use Claude all the time. So I was like, okay, very interesting. And then I did, like 10 more of these interviews. And I swear, like every single person's story almost had a similar thing in it. It was like, I sat down on the weekend, and that's when I really like become an activated user. That wasn't like the main finding from this study, but it was a finding. And what I took away from it was like a couple of things. Number one, it was a passion project that really got people excited about AI. It wasn't something they were being told or ordered to do, that they were under pressure to do. It was something like fun that they wanted to try. It was their idea coming to life. And then the other thing was this like sitting down on the weekend. They had found time just for them. They had like sat down in their home where they feel comfortable, given themselves a whole weekend, and just explored and like had fun. So I told this story because that's what I'm like wishing for this whole group today. I know that a lot of the people out there are already very advanced with AI and using it a lot, but if you haven't yet like had your moment or had your weekend where you really connected and felt like, oh, this is something I enjoy using, this is something that empowers me, then that's what I'm wishing for you. So like all the talks today are going to be full of great ideas that I hope you can take away. Like maybe hearing one of these will help you think of like, oh, I have this thing I want to make, I'm going to try that. Or, oh, I heard about this technique today, and now I'm really excited to try that. So I hope you get those ideas and feel that connection to passion. And then the other thing is like, I just hope that you feel this space is like welcoming and supportive, that you feel like you have that freedom that those people feel when they sit down on the weekend, and that then you go home and you make that freedom for yourself, and just to explore like what really makes you come alive and what makes you feel energized and powerful when you're using AI. So that's my wish for you. And our first talk is the perfect introduction to it, to talk about a way that by seeing how your job can be bigger, how your role can be more expansive, we have a senior director of UX from what used to be called Intercom, but I'm told as of today is now called Fin. Please welcome to the stage, Caitlin McCurry.
Hi, everyone. Okay, so I'm Caitlin. I'm based in London, but my accent is New Zealand, just in case you were confused. That didn't sound too British. And I think that researchers are too precious. Okay, bear with me for a moment. I'm going to be a little bit blunt, but I feel that researchers have become a little precious, okay? We've built this idea in our minds about what real research is, what counts, what doesn't, what we should or we shouldn't do. And this has led to things like not doing things that we feel are below us, or perhaps getting a little bit defensive when we feel like somebody's undermining our craft standards. Or maybe it's also sometimes leading us to feel very offended when a stakeholder doesn't align with our perspective or the decision that we recommend. Now, don't get me wrong. These standards, this mindset has served us well. I think that the craft has really up-leveled its standards over the last 10 years. However, I think that this is now starting to hold us back a little bit with the current change that we're experiencing. Because the reality is that we are here not to protect our craft, we are here to help the businesses that we work for be successful. And yes, we do this by advocating for the user and bringing their voices into the rooms that we're in and bringing reliable and valid insights into those conversations. But we also need to consider an uncomfortable truth. Sometimes what we want for our craft to be nuanced and deeply considered and thoughtful and human-centered is not what the business needs or wants. They want us to be agile and practical and fast and very concrete and specific. And when those misalignments come up, we don't get to opt out of those conversations. And I think that this tension is happening more than ever right now in the environment that we're in, because businesses are moving faster than they ever have before. Shipping software is becoming incredibly easy, and it becomes easier every week with AI. And what businesses expect of us as researchers is constantly changing. I think everybody's job is constantly changing at the moment. And I get that that is messy and uncomfortable and scary, right? But if we cling too tightly to what we think we should be or what we have been in the past, we risk making ourselves dispensable. We risk our stakeholders thinking we can replace them with AI-moderated interviews entirely, or we can replace their data with synthetic data, or we can replace their nuanced analysis with a faster, unsupervised, AI-led analysis. This is all kind of stuff of like feverish LinkedIn blogs. And I don't believe that, by the way. I'm not here to fearmonger you because I actually think the opposite. I think what is ahead of us is a really exciting future. However, this requires us to be authors of our evolution, not to opt out of uncomfortable conversations about trade-offs. Unless we face these conversations, I fear our role will be redefined for us. Or worse, the landscape will be redefined without us. By the way, I'm speaking about this as if I have all the answers, and I certainly do not. I am certainly still working this out myself. Basically, every other week something changes in AI, and I'm questioning, am I doing the right thing by my team? I'm sitting in meetings, nodding along, thinking, please, do not make me define what a RAG is. But I do know this. The more time that I spend thinking about this topic, the more that I think about what we've already achieved over the AI-accelerated period of transformation over the past 6 months, the more that I feel very optimistic about not only my team, but the entire industry. And I know that a lot of people in this room are probably anxious, so what I want to do is share some examples about how we are transforming through this change, and hopefully I can leave you with some ideas or some optimism, and most importantly, with a sense of agency. So, to start, I would like you to take that research archetype that you have in your mind about what we do and what we don't do and chuck it in the bin, okay? Because we don't need to hold on to preconceived notions about what we are or what we aren't. We can walk away from the things that no longer serve us, the rules that we used to play by that no longer make sense. And hopefully this should feel freeing. You can walk away from feeling like you don't have a seat at the table, struggling to actually make change happen, feeling dependent on other crafts to get stuff done, waiting for that stimuli to get done, waiting for somebody to prioritize something, being slowed down by others, and struggling in your craft development because maybe you don't have access to the right people to expand your craft skill sets, to become more technical. And I think most importantly, you don't have to be doing 5 to 7 semi-structured interviews for every research project for all of eternity, because I really don't think that that is the career purpose for any of us. So instead, let's walk towards greater impact and voice, to a stronger and clearer voice within our businesses, and truly owning a project end to end, from the inception of the question that we should go after to thinking about how we could mock up an actual solution, to maybe even shipping the solution ourselves without relying on other people. You can be freed from the nonsense and the silly work that we can now automate, the work that actually doesn't serve us, and refocus on helping the business answer questions that actually matters. But to do this, we need an operating principle. This is experimentation. It's an undercurrent underneath everything that we do in Intercom as we work through this time of transformation within research. And I would argue that I think that this mindset actually matters more than what you do or you don't do, because there is no right answer about how you work through this. The context that you are in, the business that you're in, and your capabilities and your constraints are going to be completely different from mine, and it really doesn't have a single right answer. But what does matter is approaching this with a mindset that you are going to try, and you are going to try hard enough that sometimes you're going to fail, and you're going to learn from those experiences. And you're going to find the right tweaks to your environment that make sense. But this experimentation mindset does not mean that we only get to do the cute stuff. This does not mean that you just get to do the fun little sexy dashboards and maybe an interactive chart. No, this means that we need to confront even the things that make us feel a little bit icky. I'm talking about how we feel about synthetic personas, maybe AI usage and qualitative analysis, all of those things that make us feel a little bit queasy sometimes because we don't know what we think about this. We need to confront those awkward edges of AI that are changing our craft head on, because if we don't do that, somebody else is going to do it for us, and I don't think they're going to do as good of a job as we would. So, what could this new archetype look like? One area that we've invested significant periods of time in is building out our reusable and durable insights systems. These help us quickly process large swaths of data, moving quickly from secondary data into high-quality, purposeful primary research work. Because what I've observed is the challenge is not so much getting access to the data. We have too much data now sometimes with AI. It's about what we do with that data and what that data is telling us. The question is no longer, can we collect this? It's what is this telling us and what should we do about it? So creating a system consolidates the unstructured data into a signal that can help you get a head start on what the gaps are, what the emerging patterns are, what are the questions that nobody's even yet asked yet in the business, ensuring that researchers are working on the highest priority opportunities. So we use LLMs to help us pipe together multiple sources of otherwise siloed, unstructured data into a single, unified, normalized data model. You could use any sources, but we often use things like sales conversations that are stored in Gong. We use Salesforce data. We use customer support queries. We use, of course, our research data. We even use Slack, bringing together these unstructured sources into a single model that can help us explore the patterns throughout the business, surfacing important insights, and then using this system to help decide what requires further attention. We have a lot of these systems, but one of these systems that we've invested most heavily in is our win-loss system. So before this change, we used to have a monthly report that we surfaced, we shared with the execs, and by the time that landed on the desk, actually a lot of the deals that we described in that report, they were already ancient history. It kind of didn't matter that much anymore. And so what we moved to is one of these systems, which is a live underlying system that the researchers and the data science team built with a live dashboard over top of that. And every week, it pulls this data and shares with a researcher who curates the report and shares with our exec team which deals we won, which deals we lost, why, and critically here, which of these losses are preventable. So this last bit's particularly important because this allows us to be really, really concrete in the recommendations that we make to the execs about specifically what we could change to improve our win rate. And this allows us to drive change that connects research insights to underlying business metrics. We have similar playbooks in market research and competitive intel, pricing. Each one of these has this durable insight system that acts as a starting point for the researcher to jump off more quickly into their primary work. So continuing on now, talking about our technical framing, we can also ship code. I know a lot of roles are excited about this idea of being able to write their own code, but researchers can do this too. I don't know if you knew this. And this allows us to unblock ourselves from moving from idea into solution. Now, I know that this might feel intimidating on face value, but this one is far more achievable than you might think with the right tools. So I've even managed to raise my own first pull request, so if I can do it, you can do it as well. So I want to share a story here about a researcher who was building a survey. It was an in-product survey that was triggered based on an interaction that someone was having with our reporting function. And they wanted this to be a nice, lightweight, in the moment experience measure of how they felt about the experience that they were going through. But as he was designing the survey, what he found was that actually it wasn't possible to trigger his survey because the event didn't actually exist in the system. Now, in the before times, he would have had to go and like blackmail an engineer and bribe them to try to get them to make this little tiny change that would instrument that part of the system and let that survey trigger. However, that change was so small, it probably would never be prioritized, it would take months, he'd give up. Now, he realized he has access to a tool called Cursor. That allows him to read our GitHub and be able to make a small recommended change to the code base based on what he needed to do. And he did that. And he was able to instrument his own survey. And this is a small thing, but it was able to unblock him without relying on others and move into being able to use a method that he might not otherwise have had access to. And you can push this further. This is where we're also looking to do this now, is pushing this into being able to actually ship small tweaks to bugs that we observe in our usability testing or in other kinds of research. Okay, so in this world that I'm describing, you are far less involved with others to get your work done. And I think on the one hand, this is a good thing because you can move very quickly, you can work on the most important signals for the business, and you can get stuff done. But on the other hand, you're at risk of becoming very isolated. So how do we manage that? Well, researchers, I think, in general, are excellent storytellers and narrative builders, but we can push this even further using AI. And this is all about moving away from thinking about the default end stage of your work being a report or a presentation. Instead, we can do much better than a report that maybe your stakeholders might not even get past the first page. We can think about sharing interactive data playgrounds similar to the win-loss example I was sharing before, where your stakeholders can play along with their analysis and follow different threads themselves. Or you could create a living dashboard that surfaces both qualitative and quantitative data together that automatically updates. But your output might not even be insights. You could now vibe code a prototype to show your stakeholders exactly what a solution space might look like. This means that you can be very concrete in what your insights could actually mean in terms of actions. So a couple of examples of what this could look like. One of our researchers, she works in web and buyer experiences, and she used Figma to mock up a GIF of an example conversation between a prospect and our Fin, our AI agent, while they were learning whether they wanted to purchase Fin for their own business. Now, she created a GIF like this that brings her insights to life rather than relying on a report, because it made the details of the buyer's experience feel very real for her stakeholders. And importantly, she wanted to communicate that these conversational experiences are a change in expectation for how buyers tend to surface new information as they're evaluating new products. They want this conversational experience. So by showing this in a very concrete way, she was able to communicate with her stakeholders that this is something that we should actually have on our web surfaces more prominently. And she was able to get alignment with her stakeholders because of that. Now, I have to talk about synthetic personas. It's legally required if I want to talk about hot topics to talk about synthetic personas here. And I'd like to reflect that even our team had a point of discomfort around this topic, but we did push ahead on this because we knew that if we didn't experiment with this, it would be picked up by a marketer instead, and they would experiment for us. So we wanted to do a reliable version of this. So our principal researcher actually created these synthetic personas using a lexicon of real customer interviews that it was trained on, so it speaks like a real customer. And this was actually the output of some of her archetype research that she did. So rather than producing a report, she produced a synthetic persona that you can talk to and learn about what our customers are actually like. So all of these changes are about freeing us up for the things that actually matter, that we are actually excellent at, These are asking good questions, interrogating the data, finding the patterns, and bringing meaning to the data. The evolution of AI in our craft should never, however, replace your thinking, and nor should it replace your unique voice, how you share your findings with the business. That's something that you need to hold on to. But these tools are about giving you freshness and creativity and a broader suite of capabilities that make you more effective as a researcher. Because being an excellent researcher is not about how well you interview. It is not about how perfectly you can manage order effects in a deeply complicated survey design. Look, these are nice, but at the end of the day, these are just tools. Our purpose hasn't changed. We are still here to help our businesses be successful. We just have many more tools at our hands that can help us do that in more rich and deep ways. So here's my proof. This is the average interview count per researcher on my team per month. The team has roughly doubled in this time, and our principal researcher, who was quite frankly one of the most impactful people on the team, has interviewed about 3 people in the last year. Most of that was recently. We are doing less primary work than we have ever done before, and yet we are more compelling in the business than we have ever been, because we can meet our stakeholders in their timelines, even when they're bonkers. We can meet them with more types of data, and we can bring reality like never before to the data when they are drowning in noise. This is what freed up looks like. And on the flip, we are doing less of this traditional work. We're flexing into more skills, more data science, more analytics, more engineering skills. The bar to entry on these adjacent skills is lower than it has ever been, and the average researcher is querying more than they ever have before. So as we continue to flex across crafts, we can stop handing off these insights and start owning the work end to end. We can push to delivery and push to outcomes, not just lip service to them. That's the shift that matters. So this is my vision for what we can achieve as a craft. Individuals that leverage all data, all methods available to them, extremely flexible to adapt into different roles, into different crafts, and be freed up to investigate blind spots and to bring reality to the humans behind decisions. They have strong voices and they command space at the table. We can see the patterns. We can build these systems to wrangle the data now, and we can dig right into the individual data points to draw out the human-centered story. This is what I believe is a better version for us, and I've given you some examples of progress towards it. If we let go of preciousness of our old ways and we pursue the scary and new but promising direction, we can be really proud of the results. So I will leave you with this. What is your uncomfortable edge that you are going to experiment with? Thank you so much.
Really taking a few questions. I think we have some mic runners out there. Anybody have a question they'd like to ask? We got one here. Do we have a microphone? Yes, wonderful.
Hi, thanks for your talk. My name is Tamara. I have a question about, we all know that sometimes you win big with AI experiments, and other times it's like, oh my God, that was a total bust. I just spent a ton of time trying to make this work and it didn't. How do you kind of deal with those losses in some way, and how do you make calculated bets about what to try to experiment with?
I think we're less calculated than we have been in the past in some ways, because actually I find that we spend far less time on each of those bets than what we would have done a year ago. We're not talking about AI, but if we're going to explore another path. The bets that the team are spending time on, maybe 1 week, 2 week, look, we can risk that because we make up that time working so quickly on other things. They can surface insights in 1 to 2 days using these systems that I was describing. So it's kind of a trade-off where I'm like, you got a crazy idea? Just try it. I don't want to calculate it too much because I think that we have to push the boundaries as much as we can, and we have to allow these fails to happen. I will reflect that I think it's something that's been a little bit uncomfortable for us originally, was this like accepting the failures. However, if we aren't doing that, we're not doing our jobs properly, to be honest. So I would say don't be calculated. Just go for it, because you can make up the time on other things now using AI.
Great question. What else? Over here? Front row. Yes.
Hello. Hi, my name is Sierra Nelms. I have a question. When you talked about synthetic data and the team doing less and less live interviews, what is the process for reintroducing fresh data to keep that model close to reality? And what metrics do you then have to track any wandering?
The synthetic personas?
Yeah.
So we are in the process of moving all of our recordings from our research sessions into Snowflake, and so the LLM queries from Snowflake and draws that into the synthetic personas. So as long as the new sessions are going into Snowflake, it should come into our synthetic personas and be categorized into the relevant archetype based on whatever characteristics we've defined. In terms of wandering personas, so they're still pretty new for us. What we've done so far is we're looking at like an inter-rater reliability, essentially, where we've been able to compare the way that the persona is responding to a specific question in comparison to how a real customer responded to a question in a real interview that was in the same cluster membership. But because they're still new, we haven't like assessed that over time. I will say though, rather than thinking it that way, we're thinking of it more in terms of guardrails on usage. So we recommend to the business that they only use them in situations where it's like supporting ideation or supporting depth of understanding about the customers and not decision making. So we should say, don't use it for decision making. If you have a high risk decision, you need to actually collect data. But if you're using it to inform the direction that you're going in terms of developing a stimuli or a message, then that's fine. So it's like a risk reduction approach.
Thank you, Caitlin. I think that's all we have time for today, but give it up again for Caitlin. Okay, so I was talking to my boss literally yesterday. I report to the head of design, and I was interested where you stand with these people, these managers, and he said something sort of interesting. He said he thought that the skill that we have as researchers of like being able to just listen to someone talk and kind of like pick up on the story and pick up on that piece that really matters to like discern that in the data. He thinks that skill is like one of the ones that's going to be most enduring and like most in demand as like the AI world accelerates. And that was kind of a surprise to me, but I was really glad to hear that he knew that and then he recognized that, and then that was his prediction. He's like a futurist now, I guess, but I think I agree. And our next speaker is going to focus on explicitly that, like as you use AI, as you use these tools, how to maintain that quality of intuition that we have as researchers. So here to talk about it is staff UX researcher at Calibrated AI. Give a warm welcome to Morteza Beruz.
All right. Hello, hello. Hello, everybody. I'm Morteza. I'm giving a little talk about how to think about the layers in research, in user research, as we're introducing AI in the workflows that we have today. So I won't attempt to answer this question. This is about as scary a question as you can ask in this room. But my favorite personal kind of definition is that we're using rigorous scientific methods to understand how to bend technology towards human. And we've been at this task for a long time, And I know alignment is a big word these days, and fun fact, we've been doing alignment in the bigger sense of the word for decades. And what's known as alignment today is probably just a special case of what we've been doing all along. And this bending is a machinery with many components, right? We exercise judgment, we have empathy for the users, we do data analysis, we have to maintain rigor, we look at the data from log analysis, we have to communicate the insights, we have to do storytelling, we have a whole range of methodologies. It's a big machinery that adapts and changes its shapes based on what the needs are. Now we have a new partner in town, not exactly Clippy, but something like that. And with that in our tool kind of bag, how is everything changing? Now, to answer this question, it may be helpful to break down research into different layers. Admittedly, these are arbitrary, and this is kind of maybe a lens to put on that big machinery to understand and decompose how AI is integrating into them. Right now, perhaps most of us use AI in the pure execution layer. We are drafting surveys, we are drafting discussion guides, we drop a CSV and ask it to analyze. We give it the context that we have and try to define a research question or refine our research questions. And then there's the bigger practice layer, which is how to communicate maybe the insights that we already have, how to think about the data science data, how to triangulate the data, how do we preserve ecological validity. And the last layer we can think of is the intuition we all have. We're building intuition as we do research and as we iterate on understanding our users in different angles. And that intuition is really the taste that we have, and we're going to get back to it and decompose that into different layers as well. Now, going beyond just execution, let's focus on adapting the practice layer to start with. And how do we do this more holistically, thinking about AI in our workflow? The simple answer is, I don't know, but I have 3 favorite examples of myself with different workflows that I've had in different questions, trying to answer them. And I'm just going to share those 3 examples as what I think belongs to the practice layer. The 3 categories are ecological validity. How do we use AI to increase ecological validity in the research that we do every day? The second one is using agents to do more and more rigorous and more frequent triangulation of data, reducing the kind of gap we've always felt a little bit between data science and the queries that we have, or quantitative UXR and the qualitative metrics. And then the last one is tailored storytelling. How do we present the data and the insights that we have to the stakeholders and different parties we work with? Ecological validity is the extent to which our findings generalize to the real world, and they're not limited to the lab we're working in. There are 2 avenues that I think are interesting in using AI to increase ecological validity in our work. The first one is tailored research tools. Making very tailored research tooling, which enables tailored methodologies for the specific research questions that we have at hand. For example, we have a quick research kind of workaround project for 4 or 5 days. It is possible now to create a custom interface for users to actually give us experience sample data and maintain ecological validity in that short budget of time. I've been able to sometimes create a custom experience sampling software in about half a day or about a day, which was kind of a dream some time ago. The second favorite that I'm really attached to is trying to use agents to run Wizard of Oz studies, right? If we have a complex system and we don't know how to generate wizard data and scale that, we could run agents to create Wizard of Oz studies where we put in like fake data originally with the researcher putting behind the computer. Now we can do that agentically and kind of scale the question, trying to understand what is the system that is going to be developed by the team, already having insights on that have been in the real world with the agentic Wizard of Oz method. The next category is having instant prototypes and live code designs. The first time I was able to do this and trying to do a participatory design session with a user where I actually prompt the interface to change as we're chatting in the interview, was kind of magical. So the user didn't have to just imagine what the interface change they're proposing would be. They could literally see it in a minute after, and then start to interact with it. So again, thinking about how we can use AI in this layer, in this example, to have a code design session, for example, that is novel and adapts to having agents that can change interfaces really quickly. And of course, concept testing is a very frequent thing we all do. But a lot of concept testing, not all of them, but some of them could be translated into prototype testing. And that's actually possible now. So a challenge I have for myself is to ask a design partner every time when we're doing concept testing to make sure it cannot be a prototype or it shouldn't be a prototype. But otherwise, it probably should be. And we should probably make something quickly and test it with users in a live interaction way. The second category is triangulations and personas. Having agents ready to perform triangulation on the data that we have from UXR with the data science data and vice versa is something very powerful that I've experienced and really deepens the understanding from the data that we have. So for example, having a DS agent ready or quant UXR ready that would take a qualitative nugget of insight that we have and quickly does deep triangulation on it and tries to augment it with everything that's relevant to it so that we can capture more understanding from the same insight that we have. And that can happen over the matter of seconds. And the other direction of the same thing. And perhaps having agentic persona development where the personas are a living document that we have or user archetypes, and they're automatically augmented, deepened, and perhaps revised in the background with every bit of qual and quant data that we gather. And all of that we can think of as a draft that is presented to the researcher, and they can accept it or think about it and brainstorm with it. And then the last kind of bucket of examples is tailored storytelling for the stakeholders. Imagine automatically generating a brief draft that adds the right focus and context for the specific person you're talking to. And this is not something foreign for us. We've done this before. We do this all the time. But imagine being able to do that for specific cohorts really quickly of stakeholders, or for specific people for that matter, if we know they have a very specific context or very specific mindset that we want to kind of cater to. And one of my favorites has been, and what I've had personal success with, has been using agents that introduce the user base to a new employee. And they kind of have that in an interactive way. They can access the agent, ask questions after an introduction, and kind of understand the user base in an interactive way using the skill that has proven to be successful. And then those insight banks or research libraries that we all have and procrastinate about adding projects to, we could have those kind of generate reports automatically for different users and different stakeholders. So we can rethink what a research library really means in this era of generative AI. And there are ways to perhaps add rigor. Maybe we can have the researcher, if the confidence level is low, having to approve a particular research report, or if it's longer than a particular kind of number of pages, it would have to go through a revision with the researcher. There are ways to both maintain rigor with these examples and increase throughput, and also increase additional efficiency that comes from AI, like the personalization that we want here. Now, I'm sure all of you have more and better examples than these three buckets that I introduced. So perhaps we can adapt our practice layer more broadly to use AI, to boost it with AI, and to kind of really leverage more holistically what AI can do in the practice of user research. But this could run a risk. And the risk is a really specific one that has been top of mind for me, and I'm sure top of mind for a lot of you, which is that if we trust and delegate to AI more and more, and across execution and practice, as I was just suggesting, we may lose the ability to build intuition. And intuition is the internalized latent model that we have of users. It is earned through deep context, through empathy and care, through wrestling with numbers and chasing hypotheses late night, It is something that cannot be easily replaced with any form of delegation to any agent. It is our version of designer taste. It is researcher taste. And it is simultaneously the most beautiful and rigorous thing, I would argue, that we have. We've all laughed and cried with participants, or a lot of us, while trying to maintain a poker face, maybe after the session. A part of the participants live with us and their story, and we remember perhaps every single time, every single one we've talked to. We've sat with them in hard times, we've been to their homes, to their workspaces, and through it all, we come to understand them at the layer of human-to-human connection that is itself hard to understand from a psychology point of view. So we carry them with us, and that's the intuition that we build. And this intuition is built with a specific loop, right? So we conduct research, we learn and deliver insights, and we reflect and build intuition. And we keep doing that. And every time we do that, we inform ourselves to do better research. We understand the users better. We try to put ourselves in the shoes of possible users with every little product suggestion. And that intuition carries us forward, right? It's a little bit of anticipatory research. Maybe that's one mechanism to introduce that, where you can inform your hypotheses. You can, look around the corner, and you can be methodic about that, but you still need the intuition that drives you through it. And the question is, can we turn this potential risk at this layer into an advantage? Can we help ourselves to use AI to actually not only not lose intuition, but build more intuition? So it turns out that AI needs our intuition to execute better too, right? Like AI does not have the intuition that we have. And we can be specific about that. We can call it context. We can call it brain dump into the context of LLM. We can call it an ongoing brainstorm that I've seen some folks have with one agent. But it is that intuition that AI doesn't have, that in software engineering practices, sometimes call it tribal knowledge of what you see a software engineer who's been on the team for like 15 years. They have this tribal knowledge that carries them forward through the challenges of software development. It's not that they're the best necessarily software engineer on the team. They just have the most intuition about the specific code base they're working with. And AI needs to get that from us as researchers too in our line of work. And we also need new ways to update that intuition. So it's a two-way kind of interaction that we need to establish here. And one way to do that, perhaps, is having these intentional intuition syncing moments during planning of studies, during execution and different layers of doing the study, and also outside of studies. If you don't have any research running, maybe you should still brainstorm with some LLM about some aspect of user base and try to develop this intuitive kind of hypothesis loop or inform the insights you've already have and dug deeper into them. Now, how do we do that? Well, imagine during the planning phase of a study, Claude or any other agent doesn't ask you to answer 1, 2, 3 questions. Maybe it asks you to write a paragraph. Maybe you have to write a whole paragraph enforced by Claude, maybe minimum number of words that you have to write about a specific question that the agent has for you to execute. And there's follow-up questions, and there's more paragraphs. There's voice mode to speed it up, to try to increase the bandwidth that we have before doing any execution, before drafting that survey, before dropping that CSV, trying to increase the bandwidth that we have with the agent and sync the intuition that we have, trying to trigger in ourselves to think about a particular user base or particular archetype of user or persona, and trying to force ourselves with the help of LLM to double click. It's also selective surfacing during the study. Maybe an agent who's running interviews for you, or an agent who's running a survey for you, or deploying it through MCP connections, maybe it will surface on purpose some of the details of the data, some numbers, some charts, some snippets of users talking, and tells you, hey, look at this is interesting for this and that reason. And that selective surfacing that the agent can do kind of lowers you in the abstraction layer again and tries to put you in that 1 a.m. mindset of chasing the hypothesis. It tries to inform you again of the details of the data, of the single words, of single numbers, of showing you the outliers that maybe are informative. And imagine the agent actually, if you wanted to do this more rigorously, having a theory of mind of the researcher, the agent actually having a model of what the researcher knows and tries to kind of sync with that, tries to inform that, and tries to build intuition in the researcher given who they are. Maybe a new researcher would have a different interaction with Claude than a researcher who has a lot of tribal knowledge and intuition on the team. And reflection. After we do a study, not because we want to inform the next study, but just because having this random brainstormings with AI, having that itch at 2 p.m. or 2 a.m., trying to talk to AI about a user base, trying to chase hypotheses, trying to find theories, and doing that often, connecting that with data, syncing intuition again, could be a vehicle that will help LLM do execution better, and then also helps us maintain that intuition building through selective service. And so this is one way to perhaps, again, arbitrary, but think about it, which is if we call the layers kind of at different abstraction layers, we have pure execution, we have the broader practice, and we have the researcher intuition that is built through it all and kind of gives rigor through it all through time, perhaps AI can help introduce this elevator, that little guy in there who's the researcher, and the AI and the interface and the habits that we have try to move the researcher up and down the layers and tries to show you an outlier and go talk to this user face to face because she's awesome. Or tries to kind of like be aware of the communication you have to do later, so drops you into the practice mode, or tries to actually do a draft of the survey, so goes to execution mode. But trying to keep the researcher informed of all layers is really the key of this interaction with AI or user habits that we can create as researchers to maintain rigor and also maintain intuition building. And so I guess the pitch is, don't just delegate execution to AI, boost the full practice layer in a very greedy way, try to eke out every advantage you can get from AI in the whole practice of using, whole practice of user research, but also protect intuition and keep building it. Thank you.
Thank you. We got to keep it moving to our next speaker, but thank you give it up again for Morteza. Our next speaker is a man on the move. He has a hard out at 2, so I'm just going to keep on schedule. But this is going to be a real treat. So there's a lot of tools being built with AI, a lot of new tools, and many of these tools are people making us, versions of us that are tools that can do interviews, that can do other things. So we have an eye on this. Sometimes people are making tools and you're like, are they thinking about it? Why are they doing this? So I think this next speaker is going to be interesting because he's going to share about a tool that he created, but also a lot about the vision for the impact this tool can make, why he thinks it's worth making, and what he hopes it does out there in the world. And this is fun because this is a colleague of mine at Anthropic. He works on the societal impacts team. Put your hands together for Kunal Honda.
Hi.
Yeah, you got it.
Hi, yeah. My name's Kunal, and I'm a research scientist at Anthropic. I work on our societal impacts team, and I want to talk to you a bit about this new tool that we built called Anthropic Interviewer and sort of how it works, but then more broadly how it sort of supports our research agenda as a team and what it's allowed us to accomplish recently. I think it's useful to first take a step back and begin to understand what is our team trying to accomplish, and I think that helps ground why we built this tool in the first place. My job is to understand how can we ground claims about AI societal impacts in a large-scale, real-world way with evidence. And so when I joined the team in 2024, one of the first things that we built was this tool called Clio. And so what Clio does is it uses Claude to analyze, aggregate insights into how our technology is being used. And so it takes conversations on our platform and clusters them to extract high-level themes in a privacy-preserving aggregate fashion. We used Clio to then build out the Anthropic Economic Index. And what this work tries to do is to understand, given all the conversations that people are having on Claude, what tasks are they being mapped to in the economy, and what percentage of the economy are we seeing being represented through AI usage. And so we can understand at a level of, like, here are the conversations that are being had, here are the tasks that they map to, and here are those occupations that we're seeing being represented on our platform. This also allows us to understand, the distribution of how augmentative those conversations are of users versus how automative they are, the relationship between AI usage and wage, and all of these other things which are very important to understanding the economic impacts of AI long term. But what Clio and the Anthropic Economic Index accomplish is they allow us to understand only what's happening within the chat window. What are the tasks people are able to perform? How are they performing them? The modes of interaction. But they don't really tell us what happens after people leave our platform. How do they feel about the interactions? How is it changing the way in which they're approaching their lives, the ways in which they talk to other people, they talk to their families, and what do they want the future of this technology to actually look like? So we had a random idea as, what if we just ask all of our users what they thought? And so our team built this tool called Anthropic Interviewer. I'm not sure what happened to the text here. But what we do is build this tool that allows us to understand at the scale of all of our users in the world, what do they feel they want the future of AI to actually look like. There's 3 stages to Anthropic Interviewer. The first is the planning stage, where a researcher like myself feeds in a question, hypotheses to Claude. It drafts a research goal, and I work together with Claude to come up with the key research questions, the insights that I want learned, stuff like this. The second step is the interviewing stage, where Claude conducts an interview live with a participant on our platform, applying interviewing best practices that we built in collaboration with Jane, who was just up here, and then asking follow-up questions. Lastly, we use tools like Clio and other internal tooling that we have to do privacy-preserving analysis at scale to understand what are the high-level themes people bring up in their conversations. Are people agreeing with each other? What are the core disagreements between people? And some representative quotes that help those come to life. So this first planning stage, we can see a small mock-up of it on the right here. All that I do is, if I care to understand a question like, I want to understand how AI is impacting creative work, I work with Claude to draft an interview plan that has a high-level research goal, comes up with 5 to 6 research questions, and goes through the interview flow that I hope the interview will take with the user. We then take this plan and feed it into a different version of Claude that's been prompted with interviewing best practices. And Claude conducts this interview on our platform. So this is a screenshot from a study that we ran in December that I'm going to talk more about later, where we used Anthropic Interviewer to ask people the role that they thought AI should play in their work. Lastly, we take these thousands of transcripts that we've collected and collapse them into themes and quotes that we feel are most representative of the data that we got. So these transcripts help us surface high-level insights into these are things that people really love about AI, it's what they hate about AI, but also like how it's changing their lives, the things that really, really draw them to this technology. I think what would be most useful here is for me to actually step through a recent study that we ran using Anthropic Interviewer. So this was work led by my colleague, Saffron Huang. And we asked 81,000 people on our platform what they want from AI. And we believe this ended up being the most multilingual representative study run of its kind. I'm not sure what happened to the quotes here. The first theme that came out from this research was that people want time back from the complexities of their modern life. They said, one quotation for this manager in Denmark said, "If AI truly handled the mental load, it would give me back something priceless, undivided attention." I think it got cut off. And so the idea here is that people are really, really excited about AI automating the bits of their work that they find most taxing, but really want AI to help, take away the parts they don't find enjoyment in and help bring life to those that do, which is like, spending time with loved ones, doing parts of their job that they find more rewarding. The second theme that came up here was that people turn to AI for its availability and its absence of judgment. And so this is a quotation which, I think these all got messed up, is this idea of people are really excited about the role that AI can have in their emotional well-being, but this doesn't always come as a benefit. And so we'll see later that there's a lot of light and shade in these interviews. So people are often very excited about turning to AI as a companion, but in other times they actually find that the role that AI is playing is one that detracts from the relationships in the real world. And so we wanted to unpack this nuance a bit more. Lastly, this is a recurring theme about people worrying about being disempowered, even by tools that they find really useful in their job. This quotation that got cut off was about a writer who used AI to help them write a short story. And when they read the short story, they cried. And they cried because it was so good, but also because they actually couldn't have written it themselves. And it sort of took away from the act that they would have had writing that story is what brought them meaning. And so they actually found AI was disempowering them in this situation. Across all the interviews, we saw that people really found both light and shade. And sort of what I mean by this is that people found the positive aspects that AI was bringing to their lives, but in the same interview, they often talked about the negative consequences that AI would have. Here you can see this theme about learning, right? 33% of interviews mentioned that people really, really enjoyed using AI as a tool for learning new concepts. The quotation on the left from an entrepreneur at Germany is, I probably learned more in a half a year with AI than I could have with a university degree. But on the other side, we see that this leads to cognitive atrophy, where people are actually displacing their own thinking by virtue of using AI to do it. A heavy AI user says, "I don't think as much as I used to. I struggle to put the ideas I do have into words." We see this light and shade come up again for economic tasks. So on the left, we see about 30% of people mentioned that they felt AI was economically empowering to them, that it helped them do their job better or it helped them explore new career opportunities that wouldn't have been available to them otherwise. On the left, there's a healthcare worker that doesn't really write much code, but said Claude helped them launch an app. At the same time, we're very much seeing people being displaced by the role that AI is playing in the workforce. And so there's this writer that mentioned, AI has actually put me out of a job. And so it's my team's job to try to understand how we can navigate these tensions and build a technology that is empowering of people. The last thing I wanted to emphasize here was going back to one of the earlier slides on the role that emotional support and emotional dependence play in people's relationships with AI. On the left, you see a quotation by a worker in Argentina. 3 a.m., my wife is sleeping. My psychologist is unavailable until the medication kicks in. The AI helps me surf that wave. It doesn't replace human contact, but it helps me buy some time. However, we see that this emotional support is often contrasted by emotional dependence. I think AI often walks the very thin line between being able to help us talk through issues, but then eventually leading to it's a tool that I feel like I have to turn to repeatedly. And there's this grad student in the US who said, I started telling Claude about things I couldn't even tell my partner. It felt like I was having an emotional affair. The last thing I wanted to emphasize was that optimism is uneven. And so something that came out of this open-ended research that we conducted was that feelings about AI really differ depending on your background, where you come from, who you are. And so an interesting theme that we sort of pulled out here was that in countries that were still developing, people were much more optimistic about the role that AI was playing in their work. We noticed, interviews specifically in Brazil and India really emphasized the role that AI could have, upskilling them, helping them find new professions that they would be more excited about. They were less worried about job displacement. In the EU, in contrast, we noticed that people were really, really worried about things like privacy, about things like the emotional impacts of AI, about some of the more negative consequences given their usage. And so this is something that I think our team really wants to unpack more as we sort of move forward and use this tool. I don't have a slide on this, but something I really wanted to emphasize is that this is very much open-ended research that helps inform our research agenda at Anthropic. And so what research like this does is allows us to understand where do people want the future of this technology to go, and then allows us to sort of work backwards from that to then train future versions of Claude to be more supportive of them in those instances. And so this is something that our team is really excited about, and I think Anthropic Interviewer specifically has been a tool that's really enabled that for us. And yeah, that's about it. Thank you.
Thank you, Kunal. Who has questions?
I do some questions.
I see one right here. Sorry about that.
You can go after them.
Hi there. Thank you so much for sharing the light and the shade. I'm particularly concerned about cognitive atrophy, especially for more junior researchers who are starting out in their careers. Did you capture tactics and hacks that people are employing to mitigate or manage or prevent cognitive atrophy?
Yeah, I mean, something that stuck out to us on the team was the fact that we have like a learning mode, for example, on Claude, and that people actually found this quite helpful. In that Claude will often like lead you to an answer rather than giving you the answer immediately. And we found that at least people reported this to be something that they found like empowering of them. But again, I don't think I think it's a very difficult question to answer, and that we don't there's not like one sure way across all professions that I'm like, yeah, this is the way you can prevent cognitive decline, I think, with any technology.
Thank you. Who else?
Hey, I have a question. My name is Kay with Pinterest. Oh my God, such an echo. So if you're a trained qualitative researcher, you wouldn't necessarily conduct interviews with 20,000 people, maybe more in this case, right? What you would do initially is you would purposefully recruit 20, 25 people and interview them about their AI perceptions and benefits and harms. And then based on that, you create a conceptual model and then do a survey to understand how generalizable those things are. Mm-hmm. That's just how we used to do it. Now, but the claim that AI is making, especially this AI-based interviewing is making, that we can get to the same conceptual model with 20,000 people and becomes more generalizable. So I have a little bit of, I feel methodologically confused, if you will, to understand what is the benefit of launching this with 20,000 people versus a handful of people, and not necessarily going through this, quantitative methods to sample from each region and test that model versus this approach?
Yeah, I think Jane would also have a great answer to this. But I think from my perspective, what scale brings is sort of, you get a diverse array of perspectives that I think even if you sampled from 25 people, you are hand selecting those 25 people in a way that's already inherently biased. I think for some of our research, we want to understand how AI is transforming the lives of all of our users, and so the easiest way to do that for us is to just ask a lot of them. But I don't think this actually replaces the small focus groups either. Like, I think what it does is helps inform the questions that we should also be asking those focus groups. And so our team works a lot with Jane to help, in coalition understand how can we answer these questions comprehensively through both of these different approaches together. Yeah.
One more, yes. Back there?
Hi, thank you for the talk, and that previous question is very important because this is something that we always deal with as UX researchers, presenting our findings to broader stakeholders. They're always asking us, why did you interview 5, 10, 25 people, whereas now Claude can interview 81,000 people. Now, something that comes with this 81,000, especially in your study, is that it's a very specific audience. These are bought-in people, right? Those are users of Anthropic, of Claude. How do you balance the results of your study with this optimism that you just discussed that is distributed geographically, especially in the United States?
I don't think I totally understand. Like, how do I... Could you say a bit more about the optimism piece?
Yes, so you mentioned that more people are optimistic about AI in the United States, in North America, but also you interviewed 81,000 people who are users of Claude.
Yeah.
How valid is that?
No, definitely. So I think for this, so this was the first global study that we ran, and so the goal of this was for us to understand the users of our platform, which is inherently biased, right? Like people who use AI, and even those who use AI and are then willing to take this study also selects for a very specific kind of person that is more likely to be optimistic about the role AI is playing in their lives. We're currently conducting separate work that is hopefully going to be a more representative sample of folks that maybe are not adopters at all, to help get a clearer picture of what it looks like across the full distribution of people.
Thank you. Okay, that's all we have time for. Give it up for Kunal.
Thank you.
Okay, everyone, now you get a break. Please come back here and reconvene at 2:30. See you then.
Great Question is an all-in-one platform for conducting, analyzing, and sharing UX research, with interviews, surveys, and now unmoderated prototype tests. It's perfect for UX designers and researchers who need fast user feedback on their Figma prototypes. It's easy to get started. Just add your prototype link to Great Question to run a study with your own selection of customers via CRM integration, or our large panel of participants. For each test, you'll get video and screen recordings, transcripts of participants thinking out loud, as well as highlights, short, shareable clips of key moments that can be assembled into highlight reels. For those who want insights at a glance, we generate rich analytics from your participants' interactions with the prototype. Timelines show where participants spend the most time or had the most issues. Paths that identify the main routes that participants took through the prototype, and click maps, which help to diagnose any issues with your designs. And putting this all together, our AI suggestions can help you figure out the next steps to improve your designs and your users' experiences. To find out more or book a demo, visit us at greatquestion.co.
And today I'm so excited to announce our official Platinum sponsor, Tarek. Take it away, Zach.
Hi, Research Week. I'm Zach, the founder of Tarek. We're incredibly excited to be sponsoring Research Week in a big way this year and are appreciative of learners and the broader research community for welcoming us with open arms. When we started Tarek about a year ago, we spent dozens, if not hundreds of hours talking to researchers in different disciplines, different team sizes, and across the world. Regardless of budgets or what a team looked like, one thing remained consistent throughout all those conversations. People wanted higher quality participants to power the research that you all do. We built Tarek from the ground up with an AI-first approach, introducing things like conversational profiling and AI-led screening that elicit more from participants so we can catch fraud before it reaches you. I'm excited to meet everyone this week, and whether you're in person or virtual, I'd love to connect and learn more about the work that you're doing. Excited for this week, and go learners. See everyone soon.
sounds so simple to just listen to customers, but people forget. When you think about a product development cycle, it's really long. You know, most companies, it's like a 2-year menu and a process to put a new item on a menu.
As our growth has really accelerated into new markets, we've really wanted to keep pace in terms of understanding how are these new customers similar or distinct from the core customer that we've known and loved for all of these years. And Listen has really been an unlock for that. I no longer have to rely on one cohort or one type of customer to speak for our entire customer base. I can get those ideas and those insights from customers on the East Coast, the West Coast, all at once.
Is we actually didn't cut our research budget. What we did is we're just doing 10 times more and being able to move much quicker. We want to create an iconic generational brand, and it starts with deeply understanding our customers.
Decisions are being made faster than research can keep up, so most of them never get tested. What if you could test more without slowing down? This is Seldon. Start by defining what you want to test and describe the problem that you're seeing. Pinpoint where it's happening in the journey and add your product or the flow that you want to test. Choose the personas you want to test with, and Seldon will run simulations and show you what's breaking and where. Test more ideas, explore edge cases, and go into research with confidence. Teams are already using Seldon to uncover issues early and drive real impact. Let us help you today.
These days, it feels like we're sketching the new frontier.
What will the next billion users look like?
This is the core question brands are asking. To get to the real answer, we move beyond what we know today.
Beyond tech limitations, beyond business objectives, at Ipsos, we go to the source of the capital T truth, the users themselves.
We need to talk to real users about their real needs.
We're a team of mixed methodologists who address the question from all angles.
We meet you at any moment in the product lifecycle, from the first what if through final launch. We help our clients make the most of the whole process.
But maybe you just need a brainstorming partner or prototyping partner to test a spark of an idea.
Our flexible engagement models deliver exactly what you're looking for.
But what about testing an experience that doesn't exist yet?
Using rigorous and standardized approaches, or inventing entirely new ones, we help you build the unknown. We meet your users and customers on their own level, no matter the complexity.
Our UXers have deep expertise in complex domains and audiences.
Even the most technical or niche target, we can help find them, learn from them, and design for them.
And we can do this anywhere, backed by ISO certification with colleagues in 90 markets.
You get broad global insights without sacrificing deep local nuance.
Let's explore and build this new frontier together.
sponsors for this event. Thank you. Give them a very big, warm welcome to Listen Labs.
Hi, everybody. I'm Jill. I lead UX research here at Listen. Listen is your end-to-end research partner for every stage of the research lifecycle. In the last few months, we've been launching a lot of really cool and powerful products here at Listen, but today I want to focus on one that we've been working on for a while that we're really excited to announce. That is active observation. So anyone in the room who's run unmoderated testing before, you've felt the limitations of that work being based solely on talking out loud and what people say and how they describe their actions. But as we know, how people describe their actions is not actually always what they actually do. What they say is different from what they do. If they don't follow your task properly, sometimes they'll get off track, making the whole session unusable. But let's see it in action. Now, Listen can actually see what actions people are taking on your screen, what they're clicking on, and how they're going through your flow. So here you'll see someone going to YouTube. They were asked to search for a recipe video under 10 minutes. They're looking, they're finding one, they're gonna click on that very tasty pasta there and come back to Listen. And in the meantime, Listen is processing what's on that screen, and it will be able to see in just a second or two here that they clicked on a short and not on a full-length video. I noticed you selected a short. For this task, we need you to click on a full video, bringing them back on track. We're really excited about this. We'd love to show you live and tell you a little bit more about what we do. We're in the big blue booth back there, so come say hi. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, Listen. Okay, this next talk, the title has to do with laundry. Laundry being treated as a chore that you do not want to do. I actually like doing laundry. I know that's weird. I like how clean it is. I like folding it. I don't know. I can just watch TV while I do it. But the chore for me that I really hate doing is dishes. And I have a dishwasher, but they kind of need, like the rinsing, and so they pile up there. And this morning, I woke up at 5:30 because I was like excited about this, and I just did all the dishes that were every single dish that I have, every fork, just out there on the counter. So, if there was a tool that could do my dishes for me, that would be the tool that I need in my life, because I just don't want to do them. It's a waste of my time. That is how a lot of our tasks are as user researchers. A lot of people don't understand that a huge amount of our job is just operations. A lot of operations. It can be soul draining, and it can be really exhausting. And it's not what most of us want to spend our time doing. So here to talk about how AI can take away some of those operations you don't want to do or streamline them is Senior Researcher for Product Strategy at Checker. Give a big warm welcome to Maria D. Karras.
Thank you. Okay, unlike Jane, who here hates doing laundry? I hate it so much that I made that my talk. I hate dealing with my duvet cover, specifically. I'm sure you've all seen this quote by now. I want AI to do my laundry and dishes so that I can do my art and writing, not for AI to do my art and writing so that I can do my laundry and dishes. This is the commentary on AI that started everything for me. I shared this last year in a similar talk that I gave with our amazing vendor Rally on their webinar. There's some Rally folks here, and it still holds strong. Believe it or not, as I was writing the last bits of this talk, this is what happened to my janky washer-dryer setup. That's older than me, by the way. It completely shredded my linen sheets because I overstuffed the machine, and they got stuck under the agitator. You can see me trying to rip them out here. So hopefully that's not an omen for how the rest of this talk goes. Anyway, back to the existential quote. I think we all want AI to serve us, not reduce us. And for a while, I wasn't sure that that was actually possible. I was definitely sitting in the skeptic territory for a long time. For me, AI is most useful in assisting my thinking in areas where I struggle. So very succinct summaries, tedious tasks, overcoming analysis paralysis. The key is knowing where to deploy it to increase your capacity, rather than letting it replace your thinking entirely. Today, I'm going to give you a 5-step playbook for building your own AI operations assistant so that you can stop fielding the research equivalent of laundry, whatever that means to you. And this is just the direction that I took. My hope is that you are inspired and a little bit more equipped to leave this conference and build something that you've been putting off. I'm sure every single person here has an idea. We obviously don't have robots doing our laundry yet. I think Jane mentioned wanting one to do her dishes. But think about laundry for a metaphor for all kinds of lower value tasks and questions that you might get. I'm Maria. I'm a senior user researcher at Checker. If you've ever had a background check run on you, that was probably Checker. Checker's verification platform powers millions of critical decisions in people's personal and professional lives. I'm not an AI engineer. I'm not a tools team. It's just me and Allison on the research team at Checker currently. You can see Allison here. In practice, our roles do include research operations, but the primary work that we're responsible for and evaluated on is the strategic research shipped and its outcomes for the company. So not on study setups unblocked for PMs who want to talk to users or tools procured. Allison and I support multiple product lines. We consult for teams across the org. We even field questions from teams at companies that Checker acquired. And not officially, but just because people know that we exist and know things about talking to users. The questions are genuinely reasonable. How do I set up my first study in Rally? Can you remind me how external participant recruitment works? Do you have any past research on user onboarding? Study help, can you review my research plan? One by one, each is fine, but they never come one by one. We tried office hours, no one came. We built a Slack channel. I missed half the questions unless someone tagged me directly, and it didn't reduce the cognitive load from context switching all day long and getting distracted from our work. Allison and I love helping, but we got drained by the repetition of onboarding people to tools, keeping incentives budgets topped up so that design can pay participants when the two of us are on PTO. For our combined skills and expertise, that's laundry, not art. We have a pretty complex tool stack. We use components of different tools for different things, and it's just hard for people to navigate without our guidance. Add in that we hold a lot of context in our heads about past research, policies, processes, preferences. That's not a system, that's a major dependency. So I designed and deployed the user research operations brain, an AI assistant that answers operational questions to help product managers, designers, marketers, and honestly even myself get unblocked when starting and running user research. You can see here that Sophie, a product manager, asked a question about how to create a survey in Rally, again, our amazing participant management tool, and the AI successfully gave her step-by-step instructions to unblock her. The most disarming thing that I can tell you is that building this took half a day, max. Writing this talk took me way more time. Training it, watching it, adjusting it on a monthly basis is definitely required, and I honestly don't spend a lot of time doing that, but the initial setup was half a day. Here's how I think about our user research operations assistant. 3 main requirements: a no-code agent layer, our knowledge, and it being deployed to the right channels. This is the washing machine for all of that laundry we talked about earlier. First, you'll need a no-code tool that wraps a large language model and connects to your company documents and lets you write instructions for how it should behave, like I did here. Checkr uses Creedle AI for this purpose, but other similar enterprise-ready options include Glean, Guru, Albus, Easel AI, and many more to pop up, I'm sure. The prompt gives it a role, a goal, a format, and a failure mode. The failure mode is the most important line. Say you don't have enough information instead of making things up, because without it, the model will guess. Recently, I actually had a situation where an AI chat within a Claude project made up flow funnel metric data. That's because it didn't have a failure mode built in. I wasn't using the tool correctly. When I pressed Claude for its sources, it literally said after this, that's exactly the kind of thing that gets embarrassing when a director looks at the doc and asks where the data came from. OK, Claude. Creedle's agents are great because you're able to choose whatever AI model works best for your tasks. So for us, that's currently Claude Sonnet 4.6. It has strong reasoning against policies and processes, speed, context window, accuracy, all things that matter for this purpose. More intense models like GPT-5.5 Pro, Claude Opus 4.7 are overkill for an assistant like the one that I just built. Not to mention expensive. They're better suited for deep analytical or long horizon agentic tasks. When evaluating models, it's a good practice to test 10 or more sample questions. Some might say like 100, but I'm not doing that. Across 3 to 5 models and grade on 3 things: accuracy, hallucination, latency. Creedle actually allows you to create a rubric and compare models in the evaluate section of its tool. Their team is actually working on ways to make this more hands-off going forward as well. Models change fast, as we all know. There's like a new one every week. So always run your own tests. Now you need to build its context. So this includes help center articles, the process docs, the tool guides, anything you would send someone if they asked you a question, or anything you would reference yourself. That's your training data. It already exists. You just need it in the form that the agent can read. My assistant searches indexed articles for the most semantically relevant information, and only the top matching pieces get passed to the LLM. So instead of keyword matching, it understands what you mean. So how long should my study be finds the same content as recommended session duration. I pinned the most critical docs, such as our user research governance at Checkr doc, so that they're always prioritized. The help centers for our primary tools, including Rally CRM and user testing, are web crawled, so they stay up to date somewhat automatically. I keep web search off, and I keep my sources tight, because too many, and the model starts getting confused about what to prioritize. By using an AI agent platform like Creedle, with my documentation as inputs, I can reduce hallucination and keep our information up to date without retraining the model. Your third main requirement is the right channel, so deployed where your stakeholders already are. For us, that's Slack, Claude Enterprise, etc. Not a new tool that people need to learn, the one that they already have open. You can see the bot in the wild here. Shane, a product designer at Checkr, actually from one of the companies that Checkr acquired, asked what external recruitment would cost for his study in our research support Slack channel. I don't have those numbers memorized. The bot pulled them from our help docs, knew to pull the respondent numbers, and then did the math based on the context in his question. That really helped me not get distracted from the strategic research that I was focused on. Once you have your knowledge base built, you can really transfer it to wherever your team is working. Creedle's MCP servers also let me take everything I've built in Creedle, so my governed data, my tools, assistants, and bring it directly to where Checkr's team already works. So I added my ops assistant to an MCP server. If you're not familiar with MCP servers, they let you connect AI to external tools like email and Slack so that it can access data from sources outside the model, or take actions like responding to an email. My company is using Claude Enterprise, so in the spirit of living where people are already working and asking questions, an AI solutions engineer helped me add the user research ops MCP connector to Claude. It took like 2 minutes, he just had to approve it. If you're familiar with Claude skills, you can also leverage that to encourage the AI to use your MCP when it should. Checker has many org-wide skills governing how the AI behaves within Claude. We even built a data governance skill after my data mishap that I showed you earlier, where it just like made up the funnel metric data. That tells the model now to never fabricate data, and it's deployed across our organization. OK, so tools aside, this is the 5-step playbook that I actually want you to take home. Because we're all using different tools. You're going to use different tools at your companies to make this happen. Write it down, screenshot it, steal it. That's the point. Before you build anything, identify the specific repetitive questions that are eating your time. Not, I get a lot of questions. Get specific. How do I recruit external users for my study? Or what interviews does the research team have coming up? Those are your training inputs. The second step is to scope it small. So one assistant, one problem, one channel, keep it boring. There's a reason that the assistant I showed you is not also our research repository. Every AI project I've seen fail to this point, or just kind of go nowhere, has had too broad of a scope and too fuzzy of a return on investment. And that stops people from getting started, too. The third step of the playbook is to gather your knowledge. So gather your help docs, your process notes, your tool guides. Keep it tight, because too many sources confuses the model. Here's a picture of that janky washer again. Rest in peace. Don't tell my landlord, but I'm pretty sure it broke. It finally broke because I overstuffed the machine with my sheets. So don't do that here either. The fourth step of the playbook is to write a type prompt. So role, goal, format, failure mode. The failure mode is the most important line. Say you don't know, don't guess. That single instruction eliminates most hallucination. And you do have to bully the AI a little bit. The fifth step is to treat it like a product. Run sample questions before you launch. Enable thumbs up, thumbs down training in Slack. Revisit it every few weeks. It gets better, but only if you tend to it. So what about the art and writing? Here's the reframe I keep coming back to. My craft is strategic research, which means discovering new things about the world and the people who use our products. Being good at this means that I lead with empathy to find out what needs to be known, understand it, get it to the right people, and influence next steps. That's the artistry of what I do. Not folding laundry for other people. At the end of the year, I will not be reviewed on how many Rally study setups I unblocked, or unfortunately, even how many cool AI things I made. You and I will be reviewed on the strategic research we shipped, what roadmap items we influenced, what the business did differently because of our work. Everything else is a big fat distraction. Deploy AI where it matters. Again, I am not technical. I'm a researcher who had a problem, found a tool that fit, and spent half a day building a solution. If I can do it, you can do it. I would genuinely love to hear what you build. Find me on LinkedIn or here at the conference. I'm more than happy to chat. Thanks.
Thank you. I think we have time for one question. I see a hand right here. One question.
Very good.
Here.
Hi, thank you so much for that talk. I'm Sabrina. I'm a researcher at Lyft. I love how you used an AI agent to kind of deflect all of those questions that were distracting you. But sometimes I find when a stakeholder comes to me in Slack and asks me, do we have research about X? It allows me to probe them. Why are you asking that? And sometimes it allows you to stop bad decisions being made or someone going down the wrong path. So my question for you is, how do you make sure that you still have those moments of spontaneous collaboration that allow you to be strategic in your work?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. This isn't replacing all of the questions that I get in its entirety, right? Like, as I mentioned, I use this agent myself sometimes to like help answer a question in a more effective, structured format that's like coming to me direct in Slack and not in the research support channel. I think it's like, yeah, I've definitely, when I've seen these questions come through, I let the agent do its work, but sometimes I do intervene to kind of ask the PM, like, what are you, out of curiosity, running a study on? I would love to find out more. So I think it's like still like making room for collaboration, but giving you kind of like a supportive framework to help answer the questions better and faster. And so like that's kind of more what I was trying to demo. Like the use case is fine, but like really it's about building things that support your ability to handle so many things that are coming at you at once, and like finding AI-assisted ways to do that, especially in the time that we're being encouraged to build, because it's really about learning the tools and seeing what's available to you, and just coming in with that product mindset. So hopefully that answers your question. Thank you.
Yay, let's give another big hand to Maria.
Cool. Thank you, Jay.
All right. Our next talk is about mental models. Those things that I think we talk about a lot as researchers, they can be very powerful. By getting a mental model in someone's head, you can affect them for a long time, not just how they behave today, but many days in the future. So they're powerful tools. But now that we're adopting AI and we're putting mental models on it, that's going to affect our behavior. It's going to affect what we do with it. So how can we take a thoughtful approach to the mental models we're bringing and use that to leverage AI the way we want to, not go off on a track we didn't want in the first place? So to talk about this, please give a wonderful warm welcome to an independent researcher working on human-centered AI, Sasha Mitz.
Okay, there we go. Thanks everybody for joining me today. We're going to be discussing the importance of what we'll refer to as calibrated mental models for building and making use of AI. The argument I'm going to put forward is that capabilities alone, new technology, is not enough. That in fact you need to couple a mental model to the capability to get sort of maximum leverage and positive outcomes. Okay, but before we talk about AI, we're going to talk about climbing a mountain, just as a sort of way to situate ourselves. So you can imagine that you and a friend are considering climbing a new mountain together. Maybe you've never gone up this route before. Maybe you can't see the path to the summit exactly, but you're going to sort of go for it. As you approach, you discuss maybe some ways you're going to go. Maybe you have different levels of aptitude or speed or confidence. You set up the rope that will join you together. If you've never gone rock climbing, you use ropes to ascend mountains safely with a partner. And as you begin, you might see something the other person has missed. You might propose one path that the other disagrees with. You discuss what you're going to do, and ultimately you make progress. We'll sort of refer back to this analogy a couple times throughout the talk. But you can imagine that these climbers, instead of just being climbers, are people representing the two parts that I discussed earlier, so the capabilities and the mental models. And the argument will be that these two need to work together to sort of most successfully ascend the mountain, and we'll discuss a bit what this looks like. Of course, AI is moving faster than many technologies in the past. We cannot just be sort of hopeful that this will go well. I'm going to argue that this needs to be deliberately constructed. Okay, the way we're going to break down mental models is into 3 layers. This is borrowed mostly from HCI literature, but adopted a little bit. The first layer is the system architecture, which concerns itself with how we expect the system to work. The second layer is the capability surface, which concerns itself with what does the system do and in what contexts. And then the final layer is what I'll refer to as the self-model layer, which is what can I verify and achieve given who I am and what I know, what I'm capable of doing. So to discuss this first layer, the system architecture layer, we're going to diagnose how users can be miscalibrated by today's AI experiences, largely because a lot of these experiences right now inherit a lot of anthropomorphic assumptions and don't ask users to engage critically with what is actually going on. I'm going to refer to this sort of first broader point as something called an interpretive gap. If you've spoken to a person before, I hope everyone here has, you may be familiar with the ways that conversations can go off the rails, but also we're quite good at recovering from that. You might notice that a person didn't hear what you said, or they weren't paying attention, or they had a different piece of information that you didn't realize they were making use of. But ultimately, because we have a shared cognitive architecture and social architecture, we can recover from those things quickly. AI does not have those things. You know, it knows lots of information, but it makes very different kinds of mistakes. It can say things confidently, sort of irrespective of the level of certainty that it has. It can disproportionately weight past things in its context. And all of these things can be highly coherent and persuasive and encourage you to, or maybe even not encourage you, but subtly lead you to not take into account the fact that its fluency is not a stand-in for the actual certainty you ought to have in your conversation with it. You could imagine maybe as like a quick example, it says one thing, there's many paths that the system might take, and it's difficult for people to calibrate to the fact that they are having a conversation with a probability distribution. They're not having a conversation with a person who has some strong internal representation of what a coherent response is that they can actually execute on. Now, the inspiration for this talk was a bunch of things I imagine some of you have seen before, which are the disclaimers at the bottom of common chatbot windows. So you might see something like, can make mistakes, please verify its work, you know, check what it says. And I want to sort of deconstruct these because I think there's a lot of sort of brittleness and unearned anthropomorphism going into this. So the first point, right, mistakes implies goal-directed deliberation. If the system has some intent in mind, which invites people to think of it the way they might think of a human collaborator, asking someone to double-check responses presupposes that they have the verification capability that they probably don't have, right? Like you're using AI to augment you, to do work you maybe otherwise couldn't do or don't have time to do. And people are not calibrated to the way in which verification needs to proceed. And finally, the phrase is informed by telling. They're saying to someone, come to believe this thing, and then giving them evidence that for the most part contradicts that, because they're having this really fluent, convincing, high-quality interaction for the most part. Now, we'll talk a bit about the capability surface layer, so how deployment can change and strain as the sort of extent of the model's surface grows. We'll take a UX research example for sort of, I hope, obvious reasons, and go across sort of increasing levels of model capability. So at first, you might be working with just a conversational chatbot. You might ask it to do something like summarize a transcript, and you can give it feedback pretty routinely. But you can't exactly tell how past context is steering its results. On the sort of next layer, you could imagine a model that has a harness that includes some tools that it's able to use. And those tools might help you do things like analyze a whole batch of interviews. But you can only interact at the output media level. You can't see the tool interactions it's choosing necessarily, or you at least don't understand all the interdependencies between them. As we get to more agentic systems, you can imagine that the system is helping you with a synthesis of transcripts. But again, you're getting even further removed from being able to give high-frequency feedback, partially because it's just structurally precluded, partially because all of a sudden you're wasting time doing this. And a lot is hidden. So I've sort of tried to, at a very high level, illustrate this along the bottom of the slide. Now, you might say something like, well, it usually goes well when I use AI. It does lots of things. It saves me time. And of course, this is the case. If it didn't do that, we wouldn't be talking about it, right? We would just say, oh, well, like, it's a kind of useless technology, whatever. If you're don't have a good mental model for using it, that's fine. But I want to point out there's 3 cases in which things tend to hold, and then more and more these are not going to hold true, is my argument. So one, the task is in distribution, meaning it was sort of something the AI has learned to do in its training data, that the user can verify the output, and the failures are recoverable. Now, if the task is in distribution, that's great, but more and more we're asking models to ensemble together lots of high-value things, which by definition are less common because there are multiplicative sort of stacking of things that it's done before. As we've talked about already, verification is sometimes either structurally precluded or not a good use of people's time, or they may not have the mental model to be able to do verification work. And as we ask AI to do more and more work that is taking action in the world rather than just providing us some documents, failures are not recoverable, because when you book a flight or buy a cake, those are actual things that have happened that are not just documents that it's created on your computer. OK, so we'll talk more about sort of how these unpack, but I want to point at a high level that the things that we need are confidence and goal alignment, in process integrity, bounded expectation about failure. These are all things that having a strong mental model of a system helps you to do, and things where not having it leads to unappropriate, sort of what we can call inappropriate reliance or uncalibrated trust. So we'll spend some time now discussing the self model. We'll return to the climber analogy, and you can imagine that what I've been discussing so far could be characterized as in 3 different ways. So one, potentially the climbers are coupled, they're working with one another, they're ascending the mountain collaboratively, and they're pointing out ways to make progress. This is not going to happen by accident. It requires deliberate attention to what the other person is doing. In the sort of coupled but uncoordinated case, the 2 climbers are still attached to each other, but they may be pulling in different directions. They may have different ideas of how to ascend the mountain. And finally, you might imagine that there's some totally uncoupled situation where the 2 climbers are just climbing up the mountain together, somewhat unsafely. They're sort of taking things as they like. But we're going to consider a few historical cases to help us figure out how to stay in this more coupled, coordinated paradigm and away from the other 2. So I think this is a fun example. We talk a lot about things in modern technology, but this is an example that is a bit more historical. So the thermometer, we think about this every day. We use thermometers to tell whether we're sick or not. Obviously, at some point in history, that wasn't true. And when did it happen? So in 1612, the first thermometer was invented. Liquid goes up and down in a tube. It gives you some information. But it took over 250 years before that saw widespread adoption in the medical industry. The reason for this was not that the thermometer didn't exist. It was that people had no idea how to make sense of those numbers and apply them to their lives. So the 2 things happened a year apart that were critical. One was a thermometer that could retain the top temperature measured. So it would basically lock the fluid in place so you could see what was the maximum reading. And then another physician collected over 1 million measurements and developed a standardized understanding of how temperature correlated with disease state. Those 2 things together shifted the practice such that thermometers became commonly used across all of medicine. Every doctor's office I'm sure you've ever been to has taken your temperature, and that is a direct result of this work. What these people were doing were acting as bridge users. They were understanding current practice, imagining a potential future state, and doing the work to couple the new technology to a mental model that took into account what was currently possible and what was now possible that was new. So let's consider one other example that are on a different topic, but I think are a nice pair for each other, which are expert systems and early aviation. Both struggled with something that we'll refer to as basically a non-uniform reliability. So they work sometimes and they don't work other times. The issue with expert systems is that that inconsistency was completely opaque. Basically, they make some prediction, but you as a user don't know when it's going to fail. In the case of early planes, this was similar, where there was inconsistent performance when the planes were flying. Maybe there were engine failures. But what they were able to do was create standardized instrumentation that effectively took early pilots' sort of hard-earned expertise and externalized it so that people could learn from it and take actions on it. Planes could be engineered to be more robust, given instrumentation that tells them things like altitude and wind speed and shear and all these other things. We have planes today. We don't use expert systems that much. Now, I want to touch briefly on a few papers in this domain. I want to point out these are early papers, mostly because this is a rapidly evolving field, but they all build on sort of a literature in HCI and trust and automation that point out 3 converging themes: that with sustained use, there is a substantial risk of degradation of human capability and skill for a couple different reasons. So one, that sustained dependence can basically cause people to have a collapse of their ability to return to some baseline skill level. This was computationally modeled, so this is not empirically proven in people, but that reserving some small percentage of work can help to repair. In a second case, there's an argument that interpretive authority can be rapidly delegated away and that there needs to be some externalized governance model. And then in the final case, that human oversight can become completely nominal and sort of a rubber stamp when the volume of AI outputs becomes too great. It basically becomes the case that people can't keep up, but they still want to sort of feel involved, and they just push things through without having a robust internal representation of actually what's going on. So again, these converge on a concern. They diverge on what the resolution is. I think actually a lot of the work that remains for us and for other folks in sort of adjacent fields is to empirically verify and prove out in which cases which of these solutions are appropriate to apply. Now, I want to provide everybody, this is like, maybe somewhat stressful to hear all the ways in which things are like not exactly going right, with some principles we can apply to do this coupling work between mental models and capabilities. So I'm not going to try to read everything to you guys, but I want to touch on a few of these points. So one we mentioned, which is to make the operational boundary legible, to make clear what signals exist about where the system is in its operational space and how do we make that available to our users. Make clear sort of what is system understanding and what is system trust. A system might understand something. It doesn't mean necessarily that you should trust it. That the capability surface has to match affordances to the system's properties. Chatbots today, I would argue, do not do a good job of this. That you need to track the conditions that you are leaning on to substantiate your trust, whether these are verifiability or recoverability or others. And you need to build a self-model that cultivates domain-specific knowledge and also keep unaided baseline work alive so that you can not fall into this sort of detached pit that you can't recover from. Now, that might even still feel slightly too abstract, so I put together a set of sort of things that you can do on Monday, or hopefully you're not going back to work tomorrow, you're staying at Learners, but if you are, maybe you can try these things tomorrow. And I broke these again across the different mental model layers. So things like periodically testing what your assumptions are and where the system is relative to the edge that you believe. Notice when fluency outpaces your ability to evaluate. Conduct manual verification where you have expertise. Log the surprises that you encounter. Make unaided baseline work part of your practice. And propose sort of new methods and ways of understanding and share these with the field. So, we can imagine that sort of UX research example that we took on the earlier slide of sort of when we were talking about increasing levels of agent autonomy. Maybe some things that could be applied in that case are work on boundary legibility. So making clear when the system is performing in a way that is that is sort of well supported by data versus just interpolated from what it's learned in training. Match the affordances of the research tooling that you're building to what the model can actually support. So creating basically contracts with the system where it is forced to encode its responses tied to some evidentiary standard or to flag its uncertainty. And finally, learn from experts or become the experts yourself in a given field. What are the right criteria for applying these tools relative to what you're expecting them to deliver for you? Now, I just want to close by making a few points sort of to reiterate, right? Like the frontier is moving. We're not going to get there, this is my opinion, with capability alone. We need calibrated mental models that will help us make sense of, see broad adoption of things that we build, and also help us and our users imagine how things could actually be different. The work is multidisciplinary. I think user research has a compelling role to play here, but it relies also on alignment research, safety research, HCI, design, engineering, all these other fields. But we do have experience studying situated use, eliciting tacit knowledge, turning field observations into practice. But the operational states ultimately need to be surfaced transparently, that we need to be relying on appropriate paradigms, and we need to seek representation in building coupling. So I just want to close with a question. What can more calibrated mental models look like? How can we enable a next generation of AI experiences that leans on deliberately building mental models and bridging them to the capabilities we see and we want to see for, to make better things for ourselves, for our users, and hopefully for the broader world. So thank you, everybody, and hopefully we have time for a couple of questions. We'll see.
Let's take one question. Anybody want to ask a question? See a hand there, right there.
Hey, thanks for the chat. I'm curious about your thoughts on calibrating trust in these systems. You talked a lot about calibrating mental models. Yeah. Thinking about these unrecoverable errors that you touched on, when they inevitably do happen, how can we ensure that trust is regained after a real-world consequential error?
Yeah, so I think there's also a lot of, at least some research already that shows that trust is easier to lose than it is to regain. So I think this is a really important question, because if you lose it, then the question is like, yeah, maybe how do you get it back, or how do we recover? I think something that systems are getting slowly better at is addressing their relative level of confidence, but usually only when asked, not always. So that is maybe one area where we can encourage sort of model outputs to more systematically represent their level of certainty and the reasons for their level of certainty, and also scaffold users to better be able to vet and interpret the decisions they're making. Ultimately, like, these are things that are somewhat structurally precluded, from my sort of opinion and understanding of current model architectures, where they're not pulling on facts about the world and then asserting conclusions from those facts. They are probabilistically predicting sequences of words. So to do a really good job of this might require either substantially more scaffolding than current models have in this direction, or just entirely different training paradigms. I'm not an expert in, like, transformer training or NLP, so I want to be a little cautious about stating what has to be done. I think there's ways we can nudge models, but I'm not convinced we can get there all the way with the current architectures.
Yay. Thanks, Sasha.
Yeah.
Give it up for Sasha, everybody. The speakers today have been so great. I hope you all are sharing me enjoying this so much. And I just wanted to give another big thanks to the curator who actually brought them together and did all the thinking about this group. So Savina Hawkins did like a ton of work to give you a great afternoon together. So can I get another hand for her? Thank you. And now we have the panel for the closeout of our afternoon. This is where we're going to actually have some discussion. I'm going to ask some questions. They're going to ask each other questions, and maybe I'll ask them questions too. So please help me welcome our duo, Giuliano Morse, UX researcher at Meta, and Chuck Kwong, UX researcher at Microsoft. All right, so our topic for this panel is UXR evals. So you've heard of evals. Now we have this UXR version of it. Can you just give us an introduction to what are these UXR evals? Why are we doing them?
Yeah, and to give a fair warning, Chuck and I might do them differently. So we might get different answers based on which one of us are talking. But I will say, yeah, the UXR evals is a methodology basically that allows UX research to play in a much more technical space where typically we haven't in the past. Meaning myself and Chuck are embedded in like post-training teams for foundational model development and steering. And what these things are, I mean, maybe it's best to start with the problem of how it was born. 2 years ago or so, we were doing these human evals to measure the model quality of one of the earlier models at Meta. And the human evals kept saying, your model's outperforming competitors. But that was clearly not true. We knew it from using the product. Leadership's intuition was saying something's not quite right. And so we kept tweaking the existing human evals, but we couldn't get it to say something that made sense. So at the time, we thought, what if we replace the human annotators with real users in their real context using the actual full end-to-end product, which is fundamentally different than the way traditional human evals are done, which is like consultants or domain experts as opposed to users. Usually not in the end product. Usually it's pulling models from an API on an A/B screen. In which case the API is bypassing a system prompt and tool calling, so you're not really getting the full actual end experience. And when we did this as a small experiment, we saw results that made a lot more sense. And from there, it's snowballed into a whole program.
Yeah, great answer. So the way we think about user evals at Microsoft AI is it's simply just bringing users into how we evaluate AI systems. If you've been sort of following the industry, evals have been a buzzword for the past year. Evals have kind of evolved from sort of an engineering perspective, where engineers kind of look through AI-generated output, look through the responses, and kind of create these rubrics to find these specific failure cases. And with these defined rubrics, there's different ways to judge them. One of them is the human annotators. The other way is using AI to evaluate AI. But what's missing in this whole picture is the user context. When you have users evaluating AI, they bring in that situational context that is often missing in machine evals and the human expert annotations. And there's so much value in that user feedback. We need to systematically kind of incorporate that in how we evaluate AI systems. And I think UXR is like a great function to really bring in that insight with our expertise and kind of evolve how we sort of evaluate AI systems today.
So you're going to do some UXR evals. You're sitting down to do it. Tell us, like, kind of concretely, how do you approach it? Like, what is the process and what do you do?
Yeah, we started using AI user evals last summer at Microsoft AI. So I work on Consumer Copilot at Microsoft. There's many different copilots. There's Enterprise Copilot, M365, all the different integrations across the M365 software. I personally work on Consumer Copilot. And so for user evals, we found that consumers' use cases and the jobs that they bring to AI are super varied. Lots of different types of intents. It could be travel, it could be advice, it could be productivity use cases. And there wasn't really a structured way to kind of capture all that feedback. And so Chris Monnier, he's a colleague of mine at Microsoft AI. He was sort of the one who came out with this initial idea of how do we do like a side-by-side test of one model versus another. It was a super simple test. We only tested 5-10 users. We used one of the AI moderated platforms. There's so many out there in the back. We personally use Outset for our initial test case. And that initial study provided such rich insight that the product team was missing. And over time, we basically scaled that process. So what you see here on the slides is sort of our workflow, the anatomy of a user eval. It really starts with a real user need. That user comes in with their own context and their task, and they try that user, they come in with that intent to try a specific model and interact with it. So it's an experiential evaluation. And then they repeat that process with a different model. And then they compare. And this is where that rich data comes from, is that comparative judgment. To have like two sort of models to compare to, the user really provides like a lot of rich feedback. And they also provide other types of data. You can ask Likert, you can include Likert questions or follow-ups. If you're using an AI moderator interview, you could do like a deep probing, and you collect all that data, and it provides like a really rich data set for you to kind of explore.
I'll add something else too, which is all the data that comes out of these evals. Not only can you use them obviously to give you really high quality signal of how your model is performing at specific use cases or overall, even relative to a competitor. So it's like a very high quality signal. But it also produces large amounts of very clean data that we then use to train reward models. We use it to train classifiers, LLM judges, even into certain production models and things like that. So the value as a UX researcher goes from providing insights that are high quality, which I think is a bread and butter thing for us. But what's a little bit different is it also produces data sets that engineering teams will consume in a very highly technical environment that actually steers the model in a specific manner. That has become almost as or more, whatever, as valuable as the insights themselves.
Yeah, that was something I was curious about, is like your technical stakeholders. How do they feel about this sort of signal? Was it a hard sell? Was it were they eager for this? How did that land for them?
It was a hard sell until the very first experiment where I had the easiest stakeholder persuasion meeting of my life, which was, here's the eval you did, here's the eval I did. Which one do you think makes a little more sense? That led to a lot of buy-in. And developing the methodology with research scientists and the technical people themselves. There was so much that I learned on how to make the methodology highly rigorous and applicable for them by building it with them. And now it's in a lot of demand. It's really, really well received, and it's seen as in the menu of evals of the auto evals, the human expert evals, that user evals brings a very distinct value to the technical folks. So it's going quite well.
Yeah, from either of you, that was going to be my follow-up question. Like when you say you look at the evals done in one way and then you look at them done in this UXR way, what is missing? What is the gap, and how are the ones you're doing better, I guess, or offering a different value?
Yeah, I can kick it off, then I'll hand it. Okay, yeah, I mean, the key thing is, so there's so much complexity here, but when it comes to more subjective evals, basically human annotators and LLM judges struggle to accurately represent real user needs. So why? Well, LLM judges are really good at catching objective things in the conversational data sets, so like factuality. LLM judge, great for that. Latency, we'll say it's got to be under 0.8 seconds, great. But is something funny? Okay, an LLM judge, they're getting better. They're getting really, really good at catching what humor is, but you actually need to objectify the subjectivity of humor. So maybe you have to say, like, it has ha-ha in the text, which is not actually funny, but that's the only way to get an LLM judge to be sensitive enough to capture a subjective thing like humor. And then human annotators are also great for more objective things, and they can be calibrated to subjective things, but that's a different talk. But generally speaking, they don't represent the real user needs. So, for something like overall preference, like they can tell you the response was factual, but was it really better than if I had used this other model? And did it actually solve my problem? Well, these human annotators, they're given instructions meant to pretend they're end users, and they simply struggle with the highly subjective components of quality. And so that's where user evals differentiates itself. If it's highly subjective and non-expert, like domain specific, we don't want users giving feedback on maybe complex mathematics, then user evals provides a very distinct value.
Chuck, did you want to add?
Yeah, for sure. I think like different evals have different benefits. I wouldn't say like one eval is better than the other. It's more so that the existing set of evals that we do, it's really missing that user context. Like Janelle said, LM judges are great for scale, consistency. We have human annotation where we have trained judges evaluating very specific types of output. Like you might have coding generated response where you need judges who are well-versed in programming, or you have writers who are judging literary responses or editing text responses. But where's the user? Where's the user context? Where's the user situation in all of this? One example that really struck me when I started doing these evals was like a specific study we did around shopping. A user came in, was asking for like designer shoes at a beach wedding. One of the models provided what looked like a really good response on the surface. It provided Jimmy Choo's shoes, Valentino shoes, very like fashionable designer shoes. And on the surface, it looked like a really well, complete, detailed response. links to reputable websites. But in the user feedback, they were like, wait, I can't be wearing stilettos at a beach wedding. I'll literally sink in the sand. That one minor insight really changed what good looked like, right? It was really missing that context behind the user, that situation. When you have LLM judges and human annotators, they don't bring in that stakes with them. They don't bring in that situation. And that's what UXR is good for, is uncovering what is the intent behind the intent, what is the situation behind the user, and bringing that to the forefront. And we think that user evals is a great sort of methodology to systemize that in the age of AI products.
What is the most surprising thing you've learned from doing this work?
I don't know. There's like a lot of different ways. I mean, one is that, I think I've kind of said these things, but I feel like one is UX research can play in a technical space. I was very surprised by that, in such a highly technical space, and add a lot of value. Another surprising thing was that in human annotation, sometimes we give annotators instructions on to pretend to be certain types of users. And I thought I was surprised to find that, these are sort of scrappy ways to approximate user preferences, which I think as UX researchers, we know that that's not great. That's suboptimal. And so, yeah, I mean, the methodology itself is a hybrid of something engineers have been doing for almost a decade and bringing our expertise into it. Like, it's funny to think that engineering teams have been doing evals for years and years without us, without sociologists and psychologists and statisticians and more in the human sciences, because it's so up our alley. So I think that was a very pleasant surprise and an opportunity for us, I think. That's at a high level. There's also been more surprising real findings, like the stilettos in the sand, like dozens of those.
Yeah, it became a phrase, stilettos on the beach, yeah. Yeah, I guess like for me, over the past year of doing these evals, I think what's surprising to me is, or just not surprising, but like I guess one interesting thing to see in the data is that user expectations are evolving just as quick as the AI models are evolving for a set of users. For users who are coming to our AI products every day, just as the AI models are coming up with new capabilities, frontier models are upgrading their models. For the users who are using them, they notice these changes. You can ask any user, like, oh, I go to Claude for this, I go to ChatGPT for this, I use Copilot for this. They already have in their mind sort of an expectation of what each model can do, and it's through these repeated use of these AI models, and that baseline keeps evolving. So when you have these traditional evals that are already predefined and kind of capturing a specific spec or a specific rubric, that's not evolving with the user. So you need these user evals to continuously have the user in the loop. Just as users are evolving, we need to keep up with their tastes, their preferences, their intents, and all sort of the dynamic situations that they bring to our products.
So for someone here today who maybe is like, I don't see myself running these kinds of evals myself in the near future, what can they still take away as UXRs from like what you've learned from your process or how you approach it? What should they, do you think, learn?
I think that you should really ask yourself if you really can't. There might be situations where it's not right, of course, but I'll say two things to that point. One is, steering a model happens in things as high up the funnel as the system prompt. And we do a lot of testing, a lot of user evals on the system prompt and manipulating it and seeing how things change. And I imagine that a lot of us are touching products where we're not working on a foundational model, that's fine, but we're doing various aspects of post-training. And for sure, the system prompt is the easiest, lightest touch possible. The other thing I'll say is, yes, user evals are particularly valuable at evaluating model quality, but they are also evaluating the full product experience. And so the sample sizes we use are quite large because model outputs are highly variable, let's say, per use case, right? You want to see how a model answers a question about growing my plant optimally like 30, 50 times to know if it's really good. You can't ask it once. But with much smaller samples, you can still get a holistic comparative understanding of the product you have. So if you're touching a product that has any type of AI output, it might still be very valuable for you to understand with some degree of scale at very specific use cases how that model performs relative to a competitor or something else. And you'll extract like fail states and delight states, and you'll then hill climb on those, and you'll do another eval, and you'll see if you changed anything or you made it worse, which happens. So it might not be for everyone, but it's probably for more of you than you might expect.
Yeah, one sort of guidance I would say, so Giuliano works on the frontier models, and I work more like on the layer on top of that. And for all of you, you might not be working on the frontier models or even the system prompt, but you can go back to your organization, your products, and see, what AI-generated output or AI feature do I have here? And how are we measuring the success of this? Are we really focused on the output quality? Or as Giuliano say, are we actually measuring the whole experience? Oftentimes, companies are just focused on the output quality. Is the response accurate? Is the response correct? But what happens after that? And that's where I think UXR can sort of provide that knowledge, that sort of expertise to understand the whole experience of the user. So you can go back to your companies and understand how are you evaluating the whole experience of this specific AI feature in my product, and how can we sort of change the conversation so that we can sort of systematically integrate more of that user feedback into that evaluation.
Yeah, we capture a lot of incidental things about the product that we don't throw away, but maybe are less relevant to my direct stakeholders because I'm focusing on the model. But we catch so much more that has nothing to do with the model using this methodology. So, yeah. Yep.
Can I get any questions from the audience? I see one here.
Hi. Okay. Thank you for the panel discussion. I was wondering, how do you see going back to, like, let's say we do model evaluations and we have some ideas on how we can improve the models. My question is like more about the agent layer. So the system that is built on the model, sometimes there are too many factors. For example, the system prompt, the like multi-agent communication, tool selection. So I'm wondering, how do you see those cases where we do like those evaluations and then figuring out which of those levers it is that we're supposed to improve for the product experience?
I can take a first stab. Yeah. Okay. Okay. So it depends. In that question, we're at least two different ways in which we might want to run this methodology to make something better. One, the first part is if it's about outputs specifically, where there was no tool calling, let's say, tool calling being, it runs off and does a search, or it pulls from some like personal memory RAG architecture to improve the prompt, or some shopping, whatever it is. You're right, there are many levers, and we will iterate and play with them. It might be about changing the annotation guidelines for the folks doing preference annotation of the model training. So that's not an eval, but that's just like A, B, A, B, A, B. This is better, but we'll give it a slight tweak. Or it might be a system prompt change. And that's much more variable, and it's sort of you're playing a little bit in a nebulous space. But then if it's something more specific, like a specific tool that's being called, let's say you have a product that does some type of a shopping thing, let's say, like I will purposefully bias part of the sample. So I will have like half of the sample be, as ecologically valid as possible, meaning just have natural conversations you typically already have. I've recruited you because I know the use cases you tend to use, so I can kind of distribute my sample with, somewhat accurately in that sense. But maybe I'll take a third of the sample and I'll be like, I want you to shop. I want you to find stilettos for the beach wedding. And in that case, it'll purposely surface a lot more problems in the shopping tool. That maybe in the ecologically valid sample, we'll only get like a 3% prevalence because they'll incidentally stumble upon it. So there's, we're giving you a very high level, but there's so much creativity with the methodology that you can laser in on things, you can make it a little less natural, a little more, and use that to adjust then like your shopping tool, with a really fine-tooth comb.
More questions? One more. Oh, this person right here.
It may be a build on that question of, we talked about correctness and system prompts and the model. When you get a response, when you're talking about someone's evaluation or preference, it sounds like correctness is one thing, but the minute you want to go beyond that, it may be a tone, style, it may be the length of the response, so many, like 50, 60, whatever dimensions that are implicit. How do you tease out what is most critical for the job? So it seems like a multi-variable kind of question for multiple jobs. It's this giant matrix of preferences or choices for people to say, I prefer A versus B. How do you dig into it and find out what matters for those jobs so you can correct it or improve the product accordingly?
Yeah, this is a great question. So actually I come from a quantitative UX background. So I've done a lot of survey research, and so when I started working on user evals with my teammates Chris Monnier, Wendy Wang, they were very focused on the qualitative portion of it. So what's missing from this whole methodology is that you don't see all the qualitative work that actually went prior to implementing the user evals. So we've done a lot of one-on-one sessions with interviews for users for a specific intent to really get a good intuition about what's important for them. And through these user evals, you can kind of treat them like a survey, right? So as they're evaluating each response A, response B, you can actually add like survey Likert questions for each of the themes that we identified in qual research, like things that, like if you're editing text, the tone of the text might be super important, or the polish of the text, or how how easily available or easy to act on. Like, can you copy and paste that text easily into something else? Those are really important attributes for specific intents, and you want to include that in your evaluation. Now that we have all these tools available to us, you can do your own drivers analysis. Use Claude, use VS Code, use any sort of models you have. Do a rudimentary sort of drivers analysis to tease out which of these attributes are most important to the outcome variable, which is the user's preference, right? Or partner with your fellow quant UX researcher. They will be super excited to play with this data, especially if you collect this data at scale. All this rich contextual feedback, the transcripts, the Likert questions, the signal, which is the user preference, and that's driving everything from this. The possibilities are endless in terms of what you can do with that data.
And can I add one quick thing, which is, like Chuck was saying, we'll add a lot of secondary metrics to the eval, not just preference. You can add things about tone. But I'll also say, like, what an even harder problem is that I have not figured out that is an extension of your question is, if you have something that's funny for one person, it's not for the other. Or if the tone is empathetic for one person, it might not be for the other. And so once you reach a baseline level of good, like this is a good model, the subjective preferences, even within the differences within the population and who you're building for, or do you even care at that point necessarily, because you need to make something as elastic as possible, becomes a really hard problem to figure out. Yeah.
This is a very rich topic. Lots of hard things to figure out, but really enjoyed hearing from both of you all today. Thank you, Chuck. Thanks, Giuliano. Please give it a hand for these two.
Thank you, Jake.
Thank you.
Okay, and that's gonna wrap it up for our AI afternoon. Thank you all so much for being here. Thank you to the Learners crew, Alex, Maggie, and everyone else for putting this on for us. Let's give them a hand. Yay.
One researcher, one morning, countless sessions. No problem. With Eureka, capture key moments in a single click. Notes write themselves. You stay focused on listening. And when a participant goes quiet, AI moderation steps in with a right follow-up, turning a dead-end answer into your most valuable quote. Headlines break every transcript into scannable moments, so you get the shape of a session in the time it takes to finish your coffee. Automated insights don't just summarize what people say, they connect it to what your stakeholders actually need to know. You set the goals, Look Back does the rest. Looking for a moment you remember but can't place? Discover lets you search across every session at once. Themes, patterns, exact quotes in seconds. And with MCP integration, you can do all of this from the LLM tools you already use every day. Less grunt work, more research. Look Back. Clarity before the second cup.
User interviews is the fastest and easiest way to recruit participants for research. We're known for fast matching, a high-quality audience, and a simple workflow that researchers love. Start for free at userinterviews.com.
Modern research is delivering more data than ever, but raw data alone does not provide a clear picture. Numbers alone get questioned. Stories alone get dismissed. For stakeholders to take action, they need both. AI-moderated interviews promise depth at speed, and they deliver. But there's still a problem. Researchers still have to do the heavy lifting to stitch qual and quant together. NIT takes a different approach. We didn't just build an AI interviewer. We built AI-moderated video questions directly into a quantitative study. NIT's AI-moderated video questions are dynamic AI-led video interviews that probe in real time, mirroring a semi-structured human moderator. Respondents answer on camera. AI follows up with personalized probes based on what they say. And everything is automatically transcribed, tagged, and analyzed. But here's what makes it different. Those qualitative insights connect directly to your quantitative data. Same study, same respondents, one story. Now you can say 73% rated this as their top barrier, and here's what they said about why it's a barrier. The result? Deeper insight than surveys, more scale than traditional qual, and research that goes from survey to story in a week or less. NIT. Research at the speed of decisions.
And today I'm so excited to announce our official platinum sponsor, Tarek. Take it away, Zach.
Hi, Research Week. I'm Zach, the founder of Tarek. We're incredibly excited to be sponsoring Research Week in a big way this year and are appreciative of learners and the broader research community for welcoming us with open arms. When we started Tarek about a year ago, we spent dozens, if not hundreds of hours talking to researchers in different disciplines, different team sizes, and across the world. Regardless of budgets or what a team looked like, one thing remained consistent throughout all those conversations. People wanted higher quality participants to power the research that you all do. We built Tarek from the ground up with an AI-first approach, introducing things like conversational profiling and AI-led screening that elicit more from participants so we can catch fraud before it reaches you. I'm excited to meet everyone this week, and whether you're in person or virtual, I'd love to connect and learn more about the work that you're doing. Excited for this week, and go learners. See everyone soon.